Hello and welcome to the Empowered Couples Podcast, where here you get modern, non-boring relationship advice for you and your partner to communicate like pros, fight smarter, and stay on the same team no matter the challenge that you face. I am one of your hosts, Aaron Freeman, and I'll just be your only host for today. Jocelyn taking a little break, primarily because, she had to go to a doctor's appointment with Sky, and I was really drawn to do this episode and this topic today on these conflict mistakes that keep you from fully repairing after arguments. Now, authentically, which is what we always try to bring and do our very best to bring you, is that we had a conflict yesterday. You think, oh no, they couldn't have. Well, yes, we did. And by going through that yesterday, we did repair quickly. At the same time, there are just places that make true conflict repair pretty difficult, and especially for males, in my perspective, right? That's the only perspective I have, and that's really what I wanted to come on here and actually share. Now, before I go into these actual mistakes, because look, we both, Jocelyn and I, make them along the way, but we see them, we experience them in the moment, we mess it up a little bit, but we do repair faster. And why is this really an important topic? Well, if you've been following us for some time and know us well, you do know that repairing and resolving conflicts is the most important thing in the longevity and health of a relationship. And that's been proven by science. Yes, there's the love and there's the support and then there's communication, but really the communication part either helps you avoid certain topics or just have it not escalate. I'm getting into the actual meat of this here, but why relationships end is because they don't repair fully or emotionally from conflicts. And that's why this is so important. So once again, if you know us well, you also know that we came up with and teach a 5R process. To me, one of the most impactful things that we have come to the realization of from all of our conversations with couples, and it is the process. It is the guaranteed way to repair from conflicts. And if repairing from conflicts is the most important thing, well, we could go on and say that the 5 R's is the most important thing you could do in your relationship. And I'm not just saying that, I honestly believe that. Now, that 5R process is both in our book, The Argument Hangover, which I'll put a link in the show notes. We also have a free web class still going that goes deeper into each of those steps with examples of how to exactly go through it with your partner together. So if you have not watched that, you can go to onlinecouplesworkshops.com/repair. I'll also put that in the show notes as well. So let's get into the mistakes. Because when you make these pretty common mistakes, you are left feeling, of course, unresolved. You also might be left feeling that it's your fault, that you're being blamed. Maybe that you're forced to move on from this topic or this conflict and just get past it. But honestly, you know that has never had you feel resolved from things. It might down-regulate your emotion, and that's an important part of conflict repair, but it doesn't fully repair. So then you are left feeling that you're not understood, and probably a bigger thing, you're not confident that anything will change. Even more so, it's probably that you're not sure that this is going to keep anything from happening again in the future. So that's really the importance. Besides, it's the number one thing for relationships, because this is the thing, if it doesn't happen, ends relationships. But in no particular order, except for how I thought about them this morning while I was meditating and contemplating on this topic, here are the mistakes that are happening that are really keeping you from full repair after arguments. And I want to use an example. I'm actually going to tell you about the conflict that we had yesterday. And I do want to just say, I fully realize that by me sharing my perspective, the nature of it being my perspective is going to be biased, because the full picture is not just my perspective, it is and includes Jocelyn's perspective. So I'm going to do my very best. Again, I'm sharing my perspective, so it's not going to give you the full picture. I'm going to do my very best to really not paint Jocelyn in a particular way that would be filtered through my emotion during the conflict. So if all that makes sense, I'm going to do my very best to also share where I was in the wrong. So again, very best I can do, still going to be probably slightly biased in my favor. Now, the subject, what actually happened? Sky, our 6-month-old, if you didn't know that already, was put down for her last nap of the day, and Jocelyn came out of the room because she put her down. She went to turn on the baby monitor, and it makes that noise that the camera is not turned on. And in that moment, she had a reaction, a feeling about the camera not being on. Now, why is that? She had mentioned to me a few other times, and this is where my biased perspective is going to start coming in. It has not happened more than 4 or 5 times. It's part of my justification. But she had asked, because I turned the camera off before, and it being off, now we can't monitor Sky, and someone has to go in the room and possibly wake her up and get the nap schedule off. So it is an important thing to Jocelyn. She had asked me to be more aware of that. I said I would certainly be more aware. And in this case, again, watch how my justification comes in. We were changing the sheet off of her bed, so I unplugged the camera and turned it off. And then she happened to put the bed back together, plug the camera in, so it was off. It wasn't on, right? So in that moment, when she was sharing, to me, and I think she would say the same, honestly, there was some heightened emotion. So when she shared, in my perspective, right, I can't believe you had the camera off again. Then my response, not being elevated, was, now hold on. And maybe I put my hands up, I don't remember. And I said, now hold on. I don't want to be spoken to this way. Hey, watch your emotion. It's getting elevated, right? So that's what I said to her. As you can imagine, that didn't help anything. And so then we ended up going back and forth. Okay, so that's going to be the context. That's what happened to us. And the first mistake that gets really clear is you think that there's one right perspective. So really take that in. When conflicts happen, you believe that there is a right way that this went down, or a right way for you to remember it. So the conflict becomes almost a battle between who's going to paint the picture the most accurately to how it actually happened. And that's a fallacy. The same reason I said to start this. By me sharing my perspective, it's inherently biased because it's just my perspective. And there were 2 of us. So the complete picture of any scenario includes both people's perspectives, which also includes their experience and emotion of it. So that's really key. If you are trying to fight for it being you both trying to get the most accurate picture, you're already off in the weeds. You're not going to truly repair this. And it also links to another mistake, is that you try then in the moment to rehash the details or the sequences of events or the who said what, when, why, order of things. And literally the moment you do this, my goal for you is when you realize we're talking about the details or the order of events, that it triggers in your mind, okay, this is not going to actually repair anything. So that's a key thing. Both those are pretty closely linked. Now, probably the very biggest mistake that keeps you from actually fully emotionally repairing after an argument is this point here. You don't take responsibility for that your action, like actual action or words that you said, or maybe body language or tone of voice, right? Lump that all into like what you quote unquote did or said. You don't take responsibility that your action had a particular impact on them. And that is the biggest mistake. It's also the hardest thing to do in repair. Now, you can see how all these are really linked, right? When you're not taking responsibility for your action, what you're typically doing is trying to justify. Well, I had a positive intent, or no, that's not the order of things. That's not what I said. Notice how you rehashing the details is, in a sense, what you do instead of actually taking responsibility. So you don't do that. You don't take responsibility that, oh, when I said this, or my facial expression, my tone, what I'm getting from you is that impacted you in a certain way. And that's the part that needs to be truly validated, and that your partner understands that you understand what that is. So I know I'm going very deep, but this topic is just this important. And let me share how this went for me. But I'll also acknowledge that this is something that needs practice, right? And the way that you listen to your partner, the way that you share expectations is such a key thing that I want to share a really exciting thing that we're actually doing. Okay, so the couples workshop, the live event we do in Arizona, we realize is limited to those that live in Arizona. So we are actually bringing a live stream studio event to you anywhere in the world. So we're taking what we actually do in our Arizona workshop, which we've sold out 49 times, have had over 1,000 attendees, and we're giving you the experience with interactions, Q&A, and the ability to practice the communication exercises, the listening exercises, everything that we do in there right then and there with your partner. You get to practice rather than trying to go through all of this when emotion is high. You'll be off camera, but we'll be there live with you, and as a way to facilitate this conversation and navigate it escalating. So this is really special. We're doing this in August. So you're probably listening to this episode around July now. So you can go to thecouplesworkshop.com, and for podcast listeners, you can enter the code podcast50 to get $50 off. Now that's going to be an early bird thing, so you're going to want to do that in the next 2 weeks. That's something really exciting we have coming up. So check that out. It'll be in the show notes also. Now moving to how in the moment I even struggled with this when it came to this camera. Primarily, even for me, knowing that I need to take responsibility for that my actions had a certain impact on Jocelyn, just something in my mind could not justify that this wasn't something that she should be upset about. And in a way, doing this work and being coaches, I think in that moment for me, when she's talking about a camera being off, and it's only been now like 2 times since she had asked about this, the level of the energy in which she had in bringing this up, I felt in the moment that basically this isn't my fault. That in my mind again, Jocelyn, you should be better, and you should be handling your emotion about this even better. Like maybe you should have paused. You shouldn't have just verbally started down this conversation. And so it was really tough for me in that moment to do this part, which was to take responsibility that my actions are having an impact. Why? Again, adding all these together, for me, it was, in a sense, it doesn't make sense. You should better handle your emotion. This camera is a small deal. You can just see all the logic, and it just has her feel invalidated for the impact. So I did struggle with that in the moment to apologize, because that's what she ended up saying also. Hey, if you just apologize for this, that's all you need to do. And I'm just thinking, I don't need to apologize for this camera being switched off, because I can easily walk back in this room and I will turn it on. And if Sky does wake up, I'll just be in there and I'll put her back to sleep. No big deal, right? So that's where I'm at. So you can see that's why the repair does become kind of difficult. Like, it's our ego. Like, why I can't just say, hey, you're right, no matter what she feels about it. I did say that you wanted me to turn the camera off, a few days back or last week, and I didn't, and I acknowledged this impact, right? So, moving on to the next mistake. And we probably didn't quite get to this place, but a mistake that does keep you often from fully repairing is that these simple things do escalate quickly. And in the relationship space, this is called a harsh startup. So it's when, think of it as going from like the 0 to 100. How many of you relate to that experience? Something happens, and it's not like there's a slow lead up to the conflict or the emotion getting more raised, more escalated, a little more triggered. No, it happens like really fast. From, hey, a camera was switched off, till now we're yelling and screaming at each other. And this is really a big indicator of the relationship, just to be honest, not being in a healthy place. Now, I know that sounds kind of harsh, but that's the case. This has been research has been found that these harsh startups are a very key indicator that you really need to do something different together as a couple. You're not on a good path. So a part of the mistake within this mistake of escalating quickly is not identifying that in the moment, the need for and requesting a pause. Not just leaving, but actually verbalizing, hey, I feel like this is getting a little escalated. I'd like to request that we take a pause from this. And another part of this mistake is then you don't necessarily say, hey, let's come back to this at a certain period of time. So, hey, I feel like this is getting escalated. I just want to request, let's take a pause. We'll just be with our emotion. We'll process it. And what if we came back to this in 30 minutes? Right? That's the right way to do it. But the mistake is you don't request a pause. It escalates, let alone even have a time. So let me move to the next mistake, which is, again, all of these really build not necessarily always in the same flow, but why conflict repair seems difficult and kind of complex is all these dynamics can play with each other at different times. And a part of this is then you have prolonged argument hangovers for more than a few hours. Now, maybe when I say that, you're already thinking like, oh, a few hours. Like, shoot, we're at a couple of days. So yes, if you're at a couple of days of a prolonged argument hangover where you're disconnected after a conflict, you're not repaired, you feel blamed, maybe you feel disrespected, you're upset, you're disappointed that you're disconnected, there's no love, connection, affinity between you, that's the argument hangover period. And the goal is to really start to shorten this from maybe it's week, days, down to the few hours, and then ultimately you don't have to jump here all at once, but you do want to move to it being more like a few minutes, right? That's the ultimate goal. So it goes on, and for some, then you never even come back to it at all. So the prolonged argument hangover then has a link to, well, you never even set the time to come back to it. So it just goes on, you're supposed to move on, all of those things. Now, the last mistake I do want to share is that you wait for them to initiate a type of repair because you are waiting for them to own up to their mistake. Because, of course, this was their fault, right? It's not on you to repair. They brought something up. They got escalated. They had emotion. They got triggered. And so really it should be up to them, right? And for me, around this camera, well, we just stayed in the conversation, by the way, but I could see how for me, there was even a thought there that, well, this is really Jocelyn's fault. Like, she got triggered by this camera thing. She could have done better with that. She could have managed her emotion better. She could have paused before saying something and then brought it up to me in a calm manner, right? All my bias and my perspective and my logic and my justification. And there was some of that in the background for me, which, I mean, it really plays into a number of the other things, right? Like, oh, it's not for me to take responsibility for this because Jocelyn, you're the one that started it or caused it. And that's kind of a part of this one too. Let me just add that in there, is that you only focus on who started it. Like, it's your fault. Like, this conflict is your fault. And that's another mistake in repair, is that there's much more to it. There was two of you in this conversation. There may have been a promise or an agreement that got broken. There might be some past patterns from your own past as a kid or with your parents or past relationships that are playing into this. So rather than think to yourself, whose fault is this? Like, who started it? And whoever started it, it's up to them to initiate repair. No, you really want to start to look at, and it's a part of the responsibility piece as well, what role did you play? Now, you might not have started it. And in this case, I sort of felt like I didn't start this conflict with this camera. But now notice how I really do need to be better at looking at where I have responsibility or a part that I played. Now, I could have played a part, and look for yourself, right? Maybe your role is that it got escalated, or that it is prolonged, that here you are a day or two after, or many hours after. Maybe a part of your role is that you didn't initiate. It could also be that you didn't resolve this quicker. And it could be that later on, maybe midway through the conflict, you raised your voice. You said something about their past. You brought up something that you knew would trigger them. So there is something that you did or didn't do within this time frame that didn't bring repair to this conflict. So that's really where you need to look. It's, once again, let me just summarize a couple of main points. You need to take responsibility for the actions and how that's impacted your partner. It doesn't matter if you agree, if the events match in your own mind. Literally, even your positive intent does not matter at this point. It's, you have to own and take responsibility that your actions did have an impact on your partner. That's what you need to hear, that's what you need to listen to, and that's what you need to understand and validate. And then you also need to make sure that you are fully listening to what it is that they're saying so you can ultimately get to the source. Now, I won't go further into this, but it's probably not actually about what you think you're upset about. For example, it really wasn't about the camera being on or off. And I acknowledge here that part of Jocelyn and I's conversation, I just kind of couldn't get past that you're really upset about the camera being off. Like, I feel even kind of now in my body, that's what I was latched onto. But Jocelyn, doing a great job, like reflecting in the moment, she did say, I'm noticing now. And that's a key phrase too, because it's not, she's recognizing that it's not really about the camera for her. Why she was upset, she was saying, now, this was probably about 15, 20 minutes into our quote unquote conflict. She said, I'm realizing that what I feel like I'm upset about is more along the lines of how much I am doing for Sky, sort of in comparison to what I was doing, but not exactly. That she puts Sky down for all the naps. Obviously, she's breastfeeding, and so she's doing that multiple times a day. She also had brought up that she washes all of Sky's clothes and orders the diapers. I'm bringing up the specifics, but she's like, I do all of these things, and it doesn't feel like you're, say, monitoring the amount of diapers or checking on the clothes and when they need washed. So anyway, all of that was coming together, and that was kind of the underlying feeling of why she had emotion about the camera. When she said that, that's when I really understood the deeper why. And that's a key piece that you need to try to get to so that you can repair. If you stay stuck on the subject or the event or the specifics or the actions that kind of started it, then you never really get to the actual thing. That's why repair doesn't happen. So and thankfully she shared it with me. Once I understood what the real thing was, it kind of makes more sense for me as a logical person, but then I can also really hear her out. I can mirror and share back like, oh, wow, yeah, I'm really getting that. It wasn't necessarily about the camera, though I did say that I would take more care about that. And it was also around she wasn't feeling like I really understand how much goes into the nap schedule and how that plays a role in us being able to sleep throughout the night. So maybe I was taking for granted a little bit what she does with sleep. So once she shared that, and again, so thankful that she had the awareness to share that, I'm like, wow, I get it. Okay. So I just wanted to share that part as well, because all these things put together, all of these layers, all of these mistakes, right? Not about the one perspective, taking responsibility, not rehashing the details and sequence of events, escalating too quickly, prolonged argument hangovers, just really all of that is the layers on top of actually understanding from your partner's perspective what the real source is. And again, all of these mistakes are what keep you from actually getting there. So closing this all out, I know I'm giving a lot on this topic, and it's just that important because it has to happen. Actual, true repair has to happen. Otherwise, you erode the connection and the trust while letting resentments create small cracks in the relationship. And the other side is repair has the potential to actually connect you even more and deeper than if everything in your world is just going good. And I know this is in the moment hard to get, but if life is just all going fine, there's a certain level of, not quite surfaceness, but like anything in the world, the challenge has to be there for you to grow. If you're an athlete, you have to push yourself. You have to be challenged, whether by your competition or challenge yourself in your physical exertion or your skills to actually get better, whether it's in business or anywhere in life to get better. It's challenges that are the raw material for you to be the better version of yourself, ultimately. And in relationship, it's kind of hard to grasp at times because conflicts, you make all these mistakes, and then you have all of the associated feelings. But honestly, when challenge and conflict is handled in this way and you truly repair, the level of connection and trust and understanding and togetherness that you're able to cultivate, I say the potential you're able to cultivate because most of you are not doing it right. You're not following these steps. You're making these mistakes so you don't actually get there, but it has the potential to deeply connect you on much more significant emotional and awareness levels of each other as partners that you just don't get to if everything is just going fine. And I promise you that is the case. So that is why I wanted to bring this topic up. I know there was a lot. Go back and listen to this again if needed. Take some notes and really message us on either Instagram or we actually started TikTok recently, both meet_the Freemans. And please do message us. We want to hear from you. What mistakes do you see that you're making? Where do you see you're able to go past them? And again, the book or the free web class, and then ultimately the couples workshop live studio event from anywhere in the world now. Check that out in the notes. You will be able to use communication and conflict resolution principles to take your relationship to deeper levels of connection. We promise you. Check out the show notes for all of those. I'm Aaron Freeman. Cannot wait to talk to you on the next episode.